Hey guys, welcome again to another episode of the OK Podcast, Season 2. And I just want to say, you guys that have been waiting for this for so long, this is the man that motivated me to start this back up. We've got Joshua from the Art of Money Saving. And before I even let him introduce himself, I just need to read something that he wrote on his website to just really give you an essence of what this man's about. So, a personal finance poem. Talking about money is something I absolutely hate. Actors, artists, musicians, our job is to create. Art, not money. I refuse to talk about that. I'm hoping to change that sharpish through my personal finance chit-chat. Man, it's just so amazing. Josh, please let the people know who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's a real pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm Joshua. I run the page The Art of Money Saving, and I've been doing that for about a year or so now. So I'm originally work in the creative industries. So I'm an opera singer. That's my go-to job. But the pandemic obviously changed theatre land for some time, which meant that I was able to take on some new projects, one of which was The Art of Money Saving. So I love talking about personal finance for creative people.
No, honestly, I think that's great. And it especially for creative people, like I was saying on your podcast, which you guys should definitely check out. Check out all of his podcasts. They're really good. I feel like there's so many creatives now that focus so much on their passion of creating art. Like in your poem, they focus on the art, but they really neglect the money side. And especially when you make it as an artist and you can earn so much money very quickly, and maybe that may not per se follow you for the rest of your life, it's so important understanding personal finance and how to actually keep your money that you earn and actually make it earn money for you. You know, I feel like a lot of people wait until they've actually earned money to start to think about, oh, what do I actually do with this? You know, so I think having other people like you now that focus on this straight away, specifically for creators, is very important.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point. I mean, one of the things is creative's very. It's a generic term because it includes so many different types of people, so painters and artists and opera singers and musicians and actors, and so it's a very broad term. And of course, my own experiences are from classical music world, which is somewhat different, I'm sure, from the life of a painter. But there are things which are transferable, and one of the things that I have noticed throughout my career is that people certainly don't like talking about money. So in my field, the job of talking about money is certainly designated to an agent or a booking agent. And all of the finance talk, the fees and the negotiations, that's all done by the agent. The artist, we never speak about money because it's all about art. And in one way, I can see credit in that. I think it's nice to have another person that's able to negotiate on your behalf, and you focus on being creative, and they focus on the negotiation, the business type things. But somehow that's never worked for me. I like to put my business hat on from time to time, and I do think it's important that we have an understanding, certainly of personal finance, and if you're being a freelance musician as well, of how to run a business as well.
100%. 100%. I don't know whether you mentioned it in one of your videos, but there was this really good Google Campus talk. I really should know this guy's name, but he essentially said, like, when it comes to the idea of managing your own finances, sure, you can hire someone to do it for you, but it's really hard to find someone that's good. Most of the time, just guys, for anyone that's watching or listening, if you know very little about a certain subject and you need someone for it, you open yourself up to so much like risk, you know, because let's be real, not everyone has good intentions, and if someone is out there to try and make money and they're managing your money and they know you know very little about money, you know, how do you even know that they're doing a good job? You know what I mean? And this is what this guy said, once you know enough to know whether this guy's doing a good job or not, or guy or girl doing a good job or not, you could potentially do it for yourself, you know, and there's very little information that they'll give you that you can't figure out yourself. You know, don't get me wrong, once you start to get into like a really high tax bracket and you've got so many multiple sources of income, sure, maybe at that level, having someone like that is important. But beforehand, guys, you really can start to learn a lot of this stuff for yourself.
I think you made a really good point in our chat last week, I think it was, on my podcast, as you were saying that talking about official financial advice. So when you go to a financial advisor, 9 times out of 10, they'll be looking after wealth that you already have. So it is normally looking after people who have a substantial amount of wealth, and that's of course how they make their money. So that's not to tar all financial advisors with the same brush. Of course, some of them are great at their job, and like you said, later on in life, when you are entering a new tax bracket or when you have inheritance to deal with, there's a place and time for that. But I think when you are starting off, podcasts like this, listening to lots of different things and doing your own research and homework is a really fundamental
100%.
part of getting started.
Definitely. That's very important. So, just kind of, as a creative yourself, like, I know you do so many different things. When I'm always trying to think about things to ask people, at least now, anyway, that I'm trying to be a tiny bit more structured, I was like, it's really interesting for the audience to get aspects of you that they may not possibly get through your normal videos. And I think, especially with smaller YouTubers or like whatever we're doing like ourselves, people very much underestimate the amount of time and effort that goes into the creation process. So I was just personally very interested, and I'm sure your audience will find this quite interesting as well, because many people don't realize this. How long do your videos, or whatever kind of creative aspect that you do, how long does that take on average, like from the coming up with the idea all the way to actually uploading?
I mean, there's no easy answer to this, because I've got we chatted last week, so you started, you observed everything that's going on, and then you created your plan. And I was very much different, that I just started. And my first video, I thought, okay, I'm passionate about personal finance. I'm going to start speaking about it. What shall I start speaking about? And I made a few notes, bullet points of what I thought was important to speak about. And then I spoke about it, and that was it. It was a camera and me.
Okay.
That was it. And that worked quite well for starting off, getting into the habit of recording, and even that was quite a big thing to do, understanding how to upload it to the computer and how to edit it, and that was fun, And since then there's been many variations. There was about 2 months where I thought, do you know what I actually did, which was really interesting, is I took a coaching from someone. I thought, I don't know much about this industry or how to go about it, so let me hear thoughts from someone else just for 1 hour, see what they think of my channel, see what they say. And it was fascinating, and I took some things away from the guy, and there was one thing in particular that really stood out to me that I absolutely hated. And I thought,
I was gonna say,
I don't want to do that. And he said, it was something along these lines, that your YouTube account isn't about, it's not about you. I'm trying to think exactly what he said. It was a really horrible sentence. He was basically saying you have to adapt. Everything that you do has to be for the fans, and you must do everything that you can to get those subscribes, and then you'll be creating at the will of the people. And as a creative, I hate that idea. Yes, of course, when you're creating content, you're looking to engage with people. But if you're starting from a point that you're thinking, okay, I need to please every single person that tunes into this, I mean, it's an endless game that is no fun. But if you start with an identity and a grounding that you think, this is what I do, and if 10 people tune in, great. If 100 people tune in, great. And if it goes viral, that's great too. That gives you a true sense of identity. So it was really fascinating for me to hear that. So, sorry, I divulged a bit. So then after that coaching, I did start creating videos that were really planned. I wrote poems at the start. I did lighting, and I spent hours and hours and hours and hours editing them. Maybe about 12 hours each video. And I've moved away from that now, and I had a really great podcast chat with someone recently, and I just came away from it thinking, you know what? It's really hard making those types of videos because I'm constantly trying to perfect things, and I don't really know what I'm trying to perfect. So I'm going back to the old style, me and a camera, little bits of icing and cherries on the top occasionally, but that's the journey.
That's amazing. And can I just say, I love the little sound effects that you add to your videos, and they really do get me. they're really fun to watch. And like I said in your podcast, you have a very good and like really fun energy about your videos. So honestly, man, like please keep it up. And like I would say that guy gave you. I don't know how I would do that, because I think it's a good idea to have someone go through your content and kind of give you this kind of feedback, but depending on who they are, like if they're someone, and YouTube is so specific, you also have to think about the specific niche that you're kind of serving and who you want to be in the long run, because where I can say that from a creative standpoint, he gave terrible advice, because at the end of the day, if you're just serving everyone, who are you? You're not putting out anything out there that probably hasn't already been done, and you're just serving the crowd. That just kind of leads to these clickbaity titles talking about everything that everybody else is already talking about. You're not giving your own unique vibe, and you're not really putting anything valuable out into the world, to be honest, if it's already been done. So but when it comes to YouTube and the algorithm, it'll probably very much like benefit you, and I've definitely seen other creatives in the finance space that push more to that side.
One thing I was going to say, which I did like that he said, is establishing your identity. So really thinking about who is your core audience, and then really creating that atmosphere for that particular audience. I thought that was quite interesting, and he said it was well introducing yourself. That was something that I completely glossed over, which is something I do maintain now. So I do always say the art of money saving, it's for creatives and other types, of course, and it gives an idea of what you're about then. I think that's a good idea.
That is a very good point, and I forget to do that all the time, because you also need to think about new people that are tuning in as well. Like, there's always someone's first video, so you do need to kind of constantly remind people of who you are and what you do. But that's a very interesting point. But I feel like you sticking more to who you are, and with the idea of, okay, I want to put something out there that I'm personally proud of. I think it's when you're happy with the product, it's so much easier to find other people that will also gravitate towards
One of the things actually that a true dilemma that I've been mulling over this week is this idea of the subscribe button. So initially when I first started, after this coaching, actually, the guy said, must say, click subscribe, and remind people, that they've got to do it. And then I thought, okay, I was saying it, and you're hearing everyone else say it all of the time, and it grates. It gets on your nerves a bit. And I know, as an audience member, as a spectator, if someone says that, I'm just skip until it ends, which is maybe a bit unfair. But so then I transitioned. I thought, right, how can I do this in another way? How can I do this in a way that is creative? So every time now, I try to create a poem. So a poem that is poetic, creative, and that says subscribe, but in a way that's new and fresh every time. So that was like the next step. But now I'm wondering, should I scrap it all together? If people want to subscribe and they get value from the content, surely if the content is good and they enjoy it, they will come back. And if it's not, they won't. And I think that, in a way, it's a behavioral thing, isn't it?
100%. I need to add some kind of facial recognition, because I'm smiling ear to ear, because I've gone through this exact same thought pattern, and I think it's quite normal, because especially as someone, I said, if I'm a connoisseur of anything, it's YouTube. I watch so much YouTube, and like you said, it kind of can get grating when certain creators are like, smash that subscribe button, you know, and all that kind of stuff, and just constantly reaffirming of what you should do. I'm like, and when I create stuff myself, I was like, if someone likes my stuff enough, they're gonna subscribe naturally.
It's true.
And while that is true, you do have to kind of look into the psychological aspects and then the analytics. Creating calls to action do lead people a lot more to actually do that thing. So it's kind of separating out the art from the business, you know. So when you're thinking out from the business aspect, you do want it to grow, of course. So you do kind of sometimes need to find creative ways, like yourself, create a poem. I'm not that creative. So guys, please smash that subscribe button if you want to hear more of this. And also subscribe to The Art of Money Saving. He'll actually transition that a lot nicer with a nice poem. I'll just tell you to do it. So thank you guys.
You make a really good point though. You do have to separate the creative from the business, and you're right, call to actions, you know, from a behavioral perspective, if you hear it so many times, people are more likely to do it. So, but for example, think about that word, smash the like button. Where did that come from? Graham Stephan. Now that was him being creative. That was him creating a unique idea that no one else had established, and he does it in a really entertaining, funny way. And now there are lots of copycats saying, "Smash it!" You know, because they've seen him 100%. Do that, and it's interesting. Good idea. Everyone wants to copy, right?
Yeah, I think it's the best one. It's the best idea to be the trendsetter. So if you're a creative kind of person and you like to try loads of different things, you're spontaneous like yourself, you know, you just keep on trying loads of different things. I think eventually you'll find that one unique thing that makes you particularly shine, which you'll start to see other people start to emanate. Like now, whenever I show people my VR avatar, they're normally quite amazed. But to be honest, this is a niche that's been blowing up on YouTube for a long time. The rise of VTubers has been something that's been ongoing for a very long time. I was personally surprised that no one in the finance industry had done it yet. In fact, I did find one other creator, but unfortunately they're not making content anymore. But I feel like now, especially when it comes to like people kind of showing their own portfolios, especially when it comes to crypto and stuff, people are going to start to want a bit more anonymity. So I see this being something that just continues over time.
I think you're right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, so like now, another thing that in the finance community that people always kind of go on about is that early retirement, you know. And I think you interviewed someone that was already a millionaire. You've interviewed so many different people, to be honest. But I really don't think people realize, like, is this early retirement thing such a good idea? Like, what would you do with your time? So if Joshua, I'm asking you now, if your channel blew up next month and from the ad revenue and different things that you do, you had enough money to comfortably retire, like, would you actually do that? And if you would, what would you spend your time doing?
No, I wouldn't retire. Absolutely not. I love what I do as a creative. I love being creative, particularly as a singer, as an opera singer. Yes, of course, financial freedom would carve a more niche pathway. And quite frankly, there are some concerts or gigs that I think, well, maybe I wouldn't do that, and that's completely normal. But one thing that's great about the artistic music world is I did my 8 years of training, undergraduate, master's degree, post-master's degree, slaving away, and I still haven't got there yet. You know, there's much further to go. And I was just doing some singing practice this morning, an audition coming up in Germany, hopefully next week, and constantly refining things. It's never a polished gem. There's always things to work on, and that, in one way, is really encouraging because it's your lifetime's work. And on the other hand, it's sometimes quite debilitating because you feel that you've never quite got there, you know?
I understand. Now, I feel like, you know, when I was younger, and people always kind of gave this idea of, okay, you're going to find this career, or you get to this point where you just stop learning. Like, that never really appealed to me. I feel like if you're not constantly improving or learning something, you're dying. That's how I think about it. So when people give this idea of like, oh yeah, I'll just retire and just relax, guys, you just die, you'll honestly just die quickly. Like, people need a kind of purpose, something to actually drive them. So when you are lucky enough to find your passion, something that you're creative, something that you can constantly craft, like, Joshua will never be like, he's amazing at singing, but he's never going to be there's no such thing as a perfect singer. There's so many crafts now that you can consistently work at, and then when you get good enough, you can start to encourage other people and help them on their journey. So there's so many levels that you can constantly do. So I feel like loads of people just kind of confuse this idea of retiring early, and like I was saying, you need some kind of purpose to keep you going, so when you are a creative and you have something that can consistently push you to be better, and especially if that involves helping other people, I feel like that's only like a net positive. I feel like there's so much good that can be done. Money and the finance community often forgets that it's not the money that you should focus on. It's the opportunity that having the money gives you. And I feel like once you have more of it, there's so much opportunity to do good.
I was listening to an interesting podcast yesterday that kind of tapped into this issue, and they were talking about the poor versus rich mindset, and it was really interesting actually. They kind of challenged you. So what is your own mindset? Are you poor? Are you rich? And they were saying it's not necessarily to do with finance, but your outlook on life. And coming back to that idea of learning, that's something that I've really changed as I've got a little bit older, that I'm more keen to learn, and I'm less satisfied by sitting in front of the TV and watching Netflix. And I think actually, taking on a little side project, and even in the most minuscule way, if I do an hour a week of learning Russian or something like that, that's going to compound over time, and I'll come away having learned something. And I'm
100%.
I am veering to, I'm not perfect, but I am veering more towards that idea of self-development and finding fulfillment in lots of different types of hobbies and projects that you have in your life, whether active, passive, learning, creativity. It's good to have lots of different variety.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like I was saying, I feel like just with doing loads of different things, you learn more about yourself, and there's always an opportunity to expand a different part of you, which you can then impart on other people. And it just, every time you go into something new, like you said, language learning, when you, like, I've been learning Japanese for a very long time, kind of goes with the whole idea of me liking anime and stuff. It just opens up a different part of your mind, and you just start to think about things very differently. And let's say now, if I became fluent in Japanese, which hopefully I'll get there someday, but even with investing now, let's say now I start to research Japanese companies, there's only so much due diligence I can do as an English speaker, whereas if I understood native Japanese and I could start to read, I would be able to get so much more of an insight than most other people can. So like your interests and all the things that you do when it comes to self-development, all of these things compound on each other. So like you said, it's very important to kind of focus on self-development, and I feel like when it comes to investing, it's kind of nearly shifted my mentality so much that I sometimes, like, old hobbies that I used to love to do all the time, like gaming, I still love it, but I can't sit down for as long as I used to just, like, I don't even want to say waste time on a game because it's still enjoyable, but I can't sit down and relax without thinking, oh, do you know, there's something I could be learning right now.
Yeah, it's just finding that balance. And I think you have tapped into an important question. So when we think of retirement, what comes to your mind? Does sitting on the beach and sipping cocktails all day, is that the thing that's in your mind? And just through my own journey and process, I started to realize that if that were the case, I'd be pretty unhappy, actually. And what I've started to discover as well is that sense of work, due diligence, planning, having goals is so important that if you come back for a long day of doing something, and then you do your hour of gaming, or then you do your hour of Netflix, it's so much more satisfying than just
100%
plonking yourself on the sofa all day and just everything is beige. You're doing everything in the same way. So yeah.
Like I think when you start to research things, your brain is like a dopamine center. Like, it wants to reward you, but if you're just rewarding yourself for doing nothing, it doesn't feel as good. So, like Joshua was rightfully saying, once you've done some kind of work and then you reward yourself, it does feel a lot better. Hopefully you don't get to the crazy mindset that I do where I have to work all the time. But, you know, you do need that kind of balance. Yeah. And speaking about balance, another thing on YouTube that you kind of hear all the time, especially if you haven't got ad block, you hear all these people that are trying to sell you, 9 to 5, I want to escape this rat race, kind of always demonizing the idea of normal work. So someone that kind of creates your own gigs like yourself, it'll be very interesting to hear your take on this. Like, do you think 9 to 5 is modern day slavery, or do you think it's some kind of opportunity?
I wouldn't say that 9 to 5 is modern day slavery. I think that ultimately we all have a choice. So I know some people that are very content with the 9 to 5, and indeed some people that I study with, creative types, they've moved away from the creative world to go into that structure because there is something about that structure that is comfortable and it's regular and you know where you stand. And certainly, you know, the grass is always greener. We can think, I'm 9 to 5, I'm stuck here and I've got to do it every day. But equally, when you turn away from that, you don't have your regular income. You have to, you know, you're your own boss. And, you know, if someone calls up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night and wants you to do a gig, do you turn it down? So there's a whole host of other dilemmas that come with being a freelancer. Now, I really think that if you're someone that is unhappy with being in the 9 to 5, then pursuing other ideas is certainly a way to go. I think always work from a position of strength. So if you are in a 9 to 5 job, then start doing other things in the meantime whilst you're doing that, and then think about eventually breaking away. I don't like this idea that, for example, if we're to take this premise that the 9 to 5 is modern day slavery, therefore I'm quitting my job tomorrow, and you don't do so with a plan or purpose. I don't think that's the way to go, and I'm starting to see that more and more in today's culture. It's like, right, I'm going to be free, I'm going, and there's lack of a plan, you know, and that's the shame, I think.
Yeah, no, you're completely right, and I think what you said was so on point. The grass is always greener on the other side. And as someone that my first work experience was at GlaxoSmithKline, so my university course, I did computer systems engineering. I also did a master's, but I had a year in industry, and during that year I worked at GSK, like really cool company, but I despised that year, mainly because of my line manager. There's very few people in this world that I despise. That man is definitely one of them. But, you know, it is what it is, and it was an interesting experience, which I definitely learned from. And then, obviously, working in the investment bank pre-pandemic, that was also an interesting experience where similar things happened, or similar attitudes that I realized, and I quickly came to this idea of like similar thought process, like, do I really want to do this? I just want to make something. Like, I need to work for myself. That is something I'm still very passionate about, and I know that is definitely the case. But now the long-term trajectory of my career path, I don't think I need to 100% stick by this, especially with so much, all the information that I know about investing. It is kind of painful knowing that if I just did a job, I would be able to consistently actually add to my investments. And so now I'm thinking, like, why not? Like, that could also help me fund my business ideas, you know? So, like you said, if you are someone that's in this 9 to 5 system and you're constantly hating it, maybe make a plan. Definitely make a plan, but try the other side for a tiny bit and
100%.
See how well that works for you, you know, because there's so many aspects to working for yourself that people don't realize. You can end up working so much harder, and you most likely will, if you want to be able to feed yourself. You're going to end up working so much harder than you normally are. You have to deal with so many different things. You have to, it's not perfect.
No,
Definitely
it's not
isn't
linear.
perfect.
You know, it's not a straight line. As
Exactly.
sometimes, not always, but sometimes being employment, you know You go into the office at 9 and you finish at 5, and that's it. I was
Yep.
found this dilemma myself during the pandemic. So, I worked my whole career. I've been on the opera stage, and then within less than a month, everything was cancelled. All my income for the next several years gone like that. And you think, what am I gonna do now? So I was faced with the question: do I go into a 9 to 5 minimum wage job in the meantime, or do I use my artistic skills to try and create something? Now, you can look at it either way. Some people might have said, well, you would have made X amount of income by doing a minimum wage job, and you would have been able to come home at night and just switch off. But the path that I'm going down is much more satisfying for me. So I work less hours, and it's flexible. I'm building something that I can continue into the future, which I wouldn't have been able to do
100%.
if I was in a 9 to 5. So the jury's out on that. What the conclusion? I'll have to look back maybe in a few years' time and think, what should I have done in that pandemic time? But I'm convinced that I'm on a good pathway. The bigger question for me, of course, is what is going to happen with the creative industries? Are they going to come back like they were in 2019, or is it going to be a really slow pathway back? If that's the case, it's a very uncertain time for creative types, because that sense of consistency is completely stripped away in that case,
When it comes to stability, and like you touched on before, in a normal 9 to 5 job, like you said, I saw loads of people that were very comfortable and were fine with staying in the same industry for about 30 plus years. In fact, a funny story that I had at GSK, which really motivated me to work for myself. So one of my team members had just finished 30 years, and the team was trying to host like a little bit of a celebration, the team lead or whatever. So we all came together. This guy got a certificate which looked like it was made on Microsoft Publisher, and he got $100, which is that's before tax, and 1 day off. And I was just thinking to myself, this is a good company. This guy has worked for longer than I've been alive, and he gets $100 and 1 day off. I don't know whether I'm just an entitled millennial, but I was like, nah, for 30 years of my life, I deserve more than that. If this is what this company is like, it was such an eye-opening moment. I was like, I have to do stuff for myself. But now with experience on my, when you're working for yourself, there is kind of no ceiling, but it, like Joshua said, it's not linear. It can take ages for you to earn anything, so you really do need to consider that. And that's why, like Joshua said, it's probably not the best idea to just jump straight into a very creative role. If you have a normal job, probably try and work on both at the same time if you are able.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's just
that's a really interesting one. An example that you gave. So 30 years of service, and then that lack of appreciation, and some really great YouTube videos about this that tap into this. You mentioned yourself as a millennial. What is the right answer? And there's I can't remember what his name is. Simon something. He does a lot of talks about technology, and he was saying that this millennial would enter the workspace, and after 6 months, they're like, I'm leaving. Why are you leaving? And the answer was, I'm not making an impact. And this is a kind of a common theme where millennials will start something, and then they'll expect the world, or expect to make this huge impact in something, but they haven't put in their due diligence and time and effort into it. And I think that certainly is a danger, isn't it? So old school is, you're in it for 35 years and then you retire, whatever. And now we're maybe, because we're used to this portfolio career, we try something and we're like, it's not me. And maybe we fall into the trap then of trying, and never really setting up something substantial and consistent.
No, you're 100% correct. And you've also reminded me of my point that I was trying to make before. Impact. So I think that was a big thing for me at the time. And maybe I was just being an entitled millennial, but especially when loads of companies today market themselves towards graduates, towards people that they want you to be able to make a change. They're like, in the interview process, they're like, oh, if you notice a problem, we want you to be able to point it out and suggest something better. We want these young people to like modernize us. But then when you actually get there and you see all these processes that don't make sense, essentially you spend most of your time fixing problems instead of just creating an entirely new solution that just works better. It's like, what am I actually contributing? You start to easily see yourself as a cog. Whereas when you work for yourself now, God forbid, but if I was to die tomorrow, I've got stuff on YouTube that is going to still be there. It's making an impact to some degree, you know? And I feel like loads of people minimize their influence, you know? I make a video, sure, maybe if only 10 people see it, I still think that's amazing, because that person that could have watched my video, gotten a different idea or mentality about investing, does that for themselves. They've changed their lives. They now go and tell their other friends. That has a network effect, you know? So you really... I don't think you should expect the world straight away, but assessing the impact and what you are actually putting out to the world, and I think it is also important.
Very, very much so. What really helps me actually is, particularly with the podcast, is to think about myself, how I consume podcasts, how I listen to podcasts. Am I on my long walk? Am I cleaning the toilet or the kitchen? Whatever. I consume podcasts in lots of different ways, and when I turn that the other way and think about someone consuming my material, my podcast, even if that's one person or two people, I'm like, wow, you know, someone listened to my podcast while they were cleaning the toilet. That's amazing. And makes those numbers actually somewhat special, rather than just, oh, it's two people that I don't know or that I've had no connection with. So I think it's good to think about it in that way as well.
Yeah, especially when you're a creative, you really need to adjust your mentality towards how you look at numbers. And there's actually a very interesting I think he's a clinical psychologist, but he's going around YouTube now, interviewing loads of YouTubers, which I always thought was a good idea. I think his name is Dr. K. But when it comes to the mentality about, especially when it comes to the finance industry, I feel like even in normal life, people are always trying to compare themselves to the Joneses. Like, they see what other people are doing, what they wear, where they're going, what kind of car they drive, and it creates this kind of very negative feeling on themselves that they need to do more. And now with social media, you know, if you're on it a lot, TikTok, Instagram, you have people flashing their wealth. So and even YouTubers now, we are also kind of guilty of this. Kind of when we show portfolio updates, I post my Instagram updates of my portfolio, and although it's with a good purpose, I have to also keep in mind people are seeing a bunch of money. How does that make them feel about themselves? So when it comes to like these portfolio updates, these TikTok traders, people flexing their wealth, do you think that social media is a net positive or negative for people when it comes to finances?
You make a really good point. So if we're seeing snapshots into people's lives, that can be difficult. And for people looking in, they can view that in whatever way that they want. And that can be really damaging, actually. So first of all, I think the responsibility is on the individual. If you start to notice that use of social media is not making you feel so good, just unfollow that person. Just unfollow or delete that particular app. I've done that loads for my own work purposes. So if I'm seeing a particular singer is singing this opera house, this opera house doing this big concert, and they're having this interview, and I think, actually, you know, for whatever reason, there's a bit of jealousy there, or that's making me feel a bit, less good about my own situation. My own situation is fantastic, so I follow. You know, and it's as simple as that. And one thing that I would say from my own personal journey is that the finance community is probably the most productive and helpful community that I found online. So, yes, there are people talking about how they've made £2 million on Bitcoin and that you need to buy their own cryptocurrency or whatever.
Dogecoin.
But generally speaking, if you go onto Instagram or debt free community, you uncover these people that are really committed to bettering their own lives and wanting to surround themselves with these people. And I think that's a really cool thing. So I have a lot of problems with social media, and I think it's can be quite dangerous. You watch programs like The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and I think that really hit the nail on the head. But I do think that this finance community is a good thing, and I'm keeping that in mind as well with my own content. So particularly the podcast, it's a conversation, and if you have that context, so you're not just saying, "I've got 150 grand, great, whatever." You're saying, this is how I got there. This was the journey. This is what I found difficult. This is what I found easy, and there's a nuance to it. Nuance is helpful. So when you hear the pitfalls and the things that are easy, it gives you a much more rounded sense of identity. And this is actually a conversation I had with my wife. Do we share our wedding photos on social media? We actually came to different conclusions, but I was of the opinion that if you share your wedding photos and you share your birthday and you share your big job promotion, you share hitting £1 million, you share buying your own home, you're only sharing those big moments in your life. So someone looks in and it's wow, their life is amazing. It doesn't show some of the other things that are going on. That's why I love podcasting, because it gives you nuance. So our discussion today, people would have heard, opera singer, creative, great, out of work for a number of months. So that's that's the reality, and that's what I love, creating content that is just real, just like a chat like we're having now.
100%, and it's something that I constantly think about in everything that I do. It's how, because like I said before, I've watched creators for a very long time. I've seen creators go from like 100 subscribers to like nearly 1 million, and the progression is very similar, and just focusing on how people view you, but what you have done. So I feel like if you don't have those things in mind, it's very easy to actually be very counterintuitive to your purpose. So my purpose is to inspire a whole lot more young people to start investing, but I have to also be aware that when I post these portfolio updates, even when I'm on Clubhouses sometimes that people know who I am, they always have this idea of, okay, you're rich, you got all this Tesla stock. I'm like, I can look at my bank account right now and I can assure you, you have more money than me. You know what I mean? Looks can be very appealing. It's not everything that you see. It's not showing the full picture. And even when it comes to investing now, like I always say, 95% of my portfolio is in Tesla, but my situation, the way that I structure my life and my thought process is very different from other people. So I wouldn't recommend other people to do that. And when you're watching other creators, a very important thing to keep in mind is what situation is this creator in, because they may be giving genuinely good advice, but if, again, good advice for a millionaire is very good, different from good advice to someone that's on like a normal income. And those are the disclaimers that not many YouTubers often give. True. So there's so many different things to think about.
Yeah, and just be cautious and be aware. So one example that stands out to me is having a friend or a colleague do a concert, and they say something like, picture of this beautiful cathedral or concert hall, concert tonight in France. So you think, wow, they got a concert night in France. So they're traveling, they do a picture of the hotel. And you think, wow, this is amazing. Speak to the friend or colleague on the phone. They say, oh, yeah, the conductor is terrible. And the hall was half empty. And you start to see the other picture. Yeah. But if you're only looking through that lens of social media, you see one view and one view only. And it's so easy to see it in that light, to see it in that perfected light, not in the light of reality. And that is the problem with social media, is the nuance and the reality of life is lost in a way that if you just sit down with someone, you have a chat with them, you start to understand those nuances. So yeah, I think that's where I'm at with social media.
That's really good. And like like, I think the way that I also try to tackle it is I try to think about the time aspect. So, like, now with my portfolio updates, sure, you can see it constantly going up, but especially now, it's going down. So I always like to think that the people that are coming to my Instagram page aren't just looking at the first, maybe this is me being naive, aren't just looking at the most recent portfolio update, but track how things have happened with time, you know, so they understand, okay, investing is a long-term goal. Sure, this guy has this much, but look at the months where he was down. He's up 10k this month, but look at a couple months ago where he was down by nearly $1,000, you know, and he didn't sell out then, you know, because he actually stuck by his principles. He learned more, increased his position, in fact, and this is how it worked out for him over time, you know. So I'm trying to create like an archive of myself, and try to just paint the whole picture, you know. And I think that's very important
valuable.
for people.
Interesting for you as well to, you know, from a behavioural perspective, for you to look back, you know, to think, oh, 2 years ago this is what my thought was, and this is what the conclusion is now.
So clearly you're very obviously aware of the YouTube landscape now, especially when it comes to the finance community. So, like, how would you like to see the space evolve over time? Like, where would you think the perfect spot would be, and how long do you think it would take for us to get there?
I had a chat a few weeks ago with Mama Furfur, who runs a YouTube channel, one of the biggest personal finance YouTube channels in the UK. And I had a similar question for her, and she said, I would love to see some more diversity and creativity. And I think I absolutely agree with her, that I'm starting to realise that if we're passionate about money and we want to continue the conversation about money, asking the same questions over and over again. Don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of this as well, right? Asking the same questions and displaying that information in the same way every time is you're going to lose people. So being creative, finding your own identity, I think is the way to go. And there's much more to discover, I think, than what is out there right now. And I see a lot of people doing similar things, which is why I love your videos, because it's unique and it's different and it's something I haven't seen before. And I can only hope that, you know, I instill or employ something that is unusual as well in my videos. And I think that's what I would hope to see more of. People that understand that there's power in you sitting down in front of a camera and talking to it, and sometimes that's better than all of the, you know, the fireworks and the nuance which people want to include.
I couldn't have put it better myself, and I just want to put a personal note out to someone who I'm going to put them on the spot a tiny bit. They were a bit too shy to do the podcast, Simi, but I'm trying to talk to more people that kind of are very new with finance or haven't even done anything at all, because I feel like a lot of creatives are focused on putting out information, but I see very few people kind of going in on the psychology of investing. And when my purpose is to get more people onto investing, I think it's a very good idea to talk with people that are barely doing it at all. You know, I think I see too many experts, but let's hear what the normal people think, you know. And like, I think the more, as a creator, especially in whatever niche you're in, it's so easy to, of course, with time, you're just going to learn more and more. So you kind of get separated over time from your audience that may still not know that much, you know? So I think having these kind of conversations, that's why at first, when my first season of the OK podcast, I very much strayed away from talking to other creators. I just wanted to talk to like kind of people that I knew and just kind of like normal everyday people. But I feel like there's benefits in both. But
you make a really good point. And one of the ironic, funny things about my podcast, I say, look, this podcast is for creative types to learn about personal finance. Now, I'm creating all of this material because those are my expertise. But am I actually really engaging those creative types? Am I saying, oh, you know, I created this podcast, or I had this discussion with someone, I think this would be really helpful for you to listen to. I'm not doing that. So the encouragement for this is for me to really connect with those people that have no interest in this whatsoever, and say there's this plethora of information that I've created just for you. Check it out if you want to. You know, it's just
I really like that. If you want to, no, that's true. No, that's really good. And I would say, because you've definitely been doing the podcast longer than I've done, or you've just done it more consistently than I've done. With all of this information, like you see someone like Joe Rogan now, who you can have your opinions of him, like, but he's definitely amassed a wealth of knowledge for the so many different people that he's talked to, and you can even see the progression over time. You can tell that he's slowly learning things. Maybe he focuses on Dare Me and DMT a bit too much sometimes, but from your own perspective, talking to so many different people, can you kind of give 3 useful things that you've taken away from the majority of the conversations you've had?
You've hit the nail on the head there. What I love about the podcast is having that opportunity to meet other people virtually often and hear their story. And everyone's story is different. That's absolutely amazing. And when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking, well, what types of guests do I get on? And it's a massive variety. So there's 3 kind of versions that I'd say of people that I've had on the podcast so far. And first of all, it's people in debt. So I've had a few people talking about their struggles with debt. One that stands out in particular was with Fernanda. She paid off, I think was it £10,000 of consumer debt. And she shares this story in such a relatable way. And I love that. So go listen in the archives. I think maybe episode 18 or something, I forget. But with Fernanda. Then there are people that are on the journey. So they've paid off their debts, or discovered that they're interested in personal finance, and they're pursuing that journey, whether it's saving, budgeting apps, investing. That's a way to go. And then thirdly, like you mentioned this episode earlier on with Matthias, who became financially independent by the age of 38, listening to those stories from people that have been through it. And they've arrived at the point where they say, right, well, I've quit my job now. This is what I do. And that progression, so the starting point of becoming debt-free all the way through to people that are just financially independent or retired early, whatever. It's great to have that plethora of information and different stories from different journeys.
No, that's great. And I feel like, I haven't interviewed anyone that's made it yet, but I think I've interviewed majority of people that are either in a tricky situation or are on their journey, so that's really interesting, and I'm sure it's very useful to just hear so many of these different dynamics, because I feel like with the older generation, sometimes they just kind of waited for things to just kind of happen, whereas with our generation, where we have access to the internet and we can go out and have these conversations, or just research other people that have already been through what we are aiming for, or talk to people that are already currently living our goals. It can help give us a different perspective, because maybe we've got a misunderstanding to how it may actually be on that side, and things that you can start to change now to maybe accelerate that goal, or maybe you realize maybe that's not actually what you want. So it's really useful. So guys, pretty much what I'm telling you to do is go and listen to the Art of Money Savings podcast, because he has a lot of useful information. And I think that the last question that I'll ask is, from one of your videos, you were just talking about your own type of investing, and you said that you've got a Vanguard account, and I think you said that the risk in your account is 10. So as I just kind of found that very relatable, because like I said, 95% of my portfolio is in Tesla. So I was just really wondering, from an investment standpoint, do you think that being able to stomach risk helps you, or do you think that this is detrimental? Because this is a ongoing debate in the finance industry.
So this is a really, really important issue, particularly with people that have started investing during the last year and a half, where there was this humongous crash, and then people have probably started investing on the way up. So it's gains.
Yep.
And what I haven't really experienced as an investor yet is that deep decline that is long lasting, and they happen. So it would be rich for me to say, I'm totally fine with being risky. I'm totally fine if my portfolio drops 60%, because I've never been through that. What I did do is I did experience a downturn of, what was it, 35, almost 40% during March 2020. And that really, really stung, and it hurt. And you can tell yourself all of these things, that it's temporary and that it will rise again. But when that is happening to you, you cannot underestimate how you feel about that. So you have to be razor sharp with your focus and vision of what your investing plan is, because until you experience that, you don't really know. And I think that's what then starts to give you clarity about how you appreciate risk, is actually starting to experience it. So I'm going to say that really I'd quite like to experience a 50% downturn or a 60% downturn, and then answer this question after that, to say, yeah, I can tolerate risk, because I think that's yet to come. And one very inspiring thing is to listen to people that have been through it. So listen to someone like J.L. Collins, who wrote The Simple Path to Wealth. He talks about when the market tanked and he sold right at the bottom, and then the next day it started to go up in his first few years of experiencing stock investing. And then a few years later, maybe it was the 2008 crisis, where it went down, didn't sell, and then it started to go up. So in those moments when the market is being quite volatile, those are the moments where I will turn to podcasts, turn to people that I know will be telling me the right information that I need to hear, saying, do not panic, do not sell, do not be irrational, keep on your plan.
No, that's brilliant. And like I always try to say is, guys, you can read all the books you want, but understanding how you actually personally feel when you start investing is so important. And the number one thing that will help you stay invested is understanding the companies that you invest in. The more financially literate you are, the more you understand, is this actually a fundamental issue with the business, or is this just an ongoing market cycle? It's normal, it happens, and you'll pass through it. It's just really important. And like Joshua was saying, there's loads of useful resources that you can listen to when you are going through this, like Joshua's. So Joshua, please tell the brilliant people all the different resources that they can get you at, and the things that they should check out.
So one important thing that I do have to say is that, of course, I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't technically give financial advice. But don't be put off by that. You'll hear that a lot in videos. This does not constitute as financial advice. It's because, as Kay rightly pointed out, that we're not able to cast our net that wide and say to everyone, you should do exactly what I'm doing, because my circumstances are 100%. Unique, and they're probably very different from your circumstances. So, anyway, I diverge. You can find me at The Art of Money Saving on Instagram. So that special name, theartofmoneysaving.com, on YouTube, the podcast. The website is a good place to go, theartofmoneysaving.com, because you can get all the social media, the podcast, YouTube, all that stuff is there for you to find out. And come find me, send me a message if you enjoyed the podcast, and reach out and let's have a chat.
100%. And guys, see what he just said? Reach out, let's have a chat. He will talk to you. He won't bite. Please, guys. We are nice people. We will have friendly conversations. But this conversation, Joshua, has been amazing. Again, as soon as I had a chance to speak to you, I was like, I know I have to speak to this guy again. And there'll definitely be a part 2, part 3, part 4. We'll keep this up over the years. We'll see how our mindset evolves with time. But thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. Bye.
Thank you. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.